Well, hello everybody. We are actually on to week 4. Hello, Alistair. Hello, Lizzie.
Hello.
So this week we are joined by the fabulous Lizzie Curtis, who we've had the pleasure of knowing for quite a number of years. But Lizzie, anybody who doesn't know you, would you like to tell us about yourself and also about the fabulous things that you're doing on your channel?
Oh, right. Yeah, no problem at all. Lizzie Curtis, indeed. And so I started off my TV life. Oh, it must be 12, 13 years ago now, perhaps a bit longer, and started in papercraft, which everybody knew me for that. And it was really odd because I used to say to the people that I worked with, can I do this in sewing? Can I do this in fabric? And they'd say, oh, no, you keep to the brief, as they'd say. And then eventually I got into the sewing part of the TV life, which was amazing. But I was still restricted. I was still restricted by the products that I demonstrated. So I thought, you know what, I want to do other things. I want to make my own patterns. I want to have a group of ladies that are on the same wavelength as me. So I created my website, which is lizziecurtis.com, and that's Lizzie with a Y. And it's coming up to 7 years ago now. And I started off with 3 patterns on my website. And I said to my daughter, Abigail, I said, could you just test my website? And I've developed a group for ladies that they can join, which is now called Creative Friends, and it's a subscription. I said, could you go and test that out for me? So she said, yes, mum, because she's a dutiful child. And so she went on the website, she joined the group, and I could see it come up on my phone because this is all new. I mean, I have no idea what I was doing. And she said, oh, yeah, she said, and the patterns are free at that time. The patterns are free, and she could join the group. And we had a special group on Facebook, and she went and did all of that and tested it out. That took literally 15 minutes. And then about half an hour later, I launched it out there. And I was lucky because obviously I'd had this TV presence, and that really raises your profile, and people get to know you. And it's really fortuitous, I suppose, that you can do that. And so within about an hour, I had 50 ladies join my group, and I was like, oh, I like this, I like this, I like this. And then, of course, I had to start developing patterns and creating, which when I worked with a lady called Kath, and when we look back at those original patterns, it's like, shall we just rewrite those, Lizzie? Yes, I think so. Because they're, you start there and you have to work up, don't you?
Of course you do.
So now we have all the technology. Even though I'm on my phone today, I have all the technology and all the software and all of that to help me develop patterns and creativity, especially for my group. Actually, I don't really do it for anybody else. And we've got just under 300 members now. We were 700, nearly 800 when it was COVID, understandably, because we all had to do something. But now we're steady at about 300 members. And we've just done 12 days. Every year I do the 12 days of Christmas, which starts Boxing Day. It's free to everybody. It's on my Lizzie Curtis page. And for 12 consecutive nights, I mean, whose idea was that? We build a quilt up, and I've done that for 3 or 4 years now. And so this year I thought, I'll do the 12 days of summer. Whose idea was that? And so I've just finished last Friday, and we built this little summer quilt up here, which is just lovely. And the ladies in the group, I've had about half a dozen made, fully completed, all the binding and everything. And so many of the ladies are still building the blocks up because we've got a mixture of applique and I did about 7 different, 8, I don't know, I lost count in the end, different techniques of how to do applique. Believe me, it's not just raw edge applique. And then we did FPP, which blew everybody's mind, because it is different. And then a traditional block, which is the basket one in the middle. And so lots of different things. It was great. And everybody looked forward to it every night at 7. And as I say, the videos are on my Creative Friends Facebook page, and you have to join. You have to go to the website and join up. It says on the tabs to join. So, but it is wonderful that I'm very, very fortunate to have you know, these wonderful ladies and a fantastic admin team that keep me propped up. So it's always exciting, Kim, as you know. It's always exciting,
yeah.
you know, Alistair, sorry, to develop new things. Yeah, sorry, I remembered you were in the room, but you didn't ask the question.
But I think, you know, a huge thank you for everybody who watches you, Lizzie, because you are very generous in what you hand over. So
I try to.
anybody who wants to follow Lizzie, I will pop the link onto your website, and then they can find out all of that information.
Great,
From
thank you.
Mr. MacDonald, I'll announce the
Good
winner.
morning.
Good morning. Oh, one thing before I come to you, Lizzie, I do know you've got something really special for anybody today watching who leaves a comment in the YouTube channel.
Yes, yes. If anybody leaves a comment, we'll randomly choose somebody to win my 2 books. So I've developed 2 books called 50 Mini Mates. That might be back to front on your screen.
No, fine.
Is it?
Fine for me.
So we've got 50 little mini mates in that one, 50 mini mates in the pink one. So 2 books, and they're quite hefty things, to one person that leaves a lovely comment for us in just the YouTube.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That's very generous of you, Lizzie. Alistair, you go on, say good morning to everybody, because we want to know that you're here.
Sorry about Millie.
Oh, good. Oh, was that Millie?
Yeah, she's famous.
But good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you're watching this. Yes, no, I'm here.
Yeah, here. Well, let's go straight into week 4, which was the Korean week, and it was Yudon Choi was our guest judge, which is that how you say it? Is that right? Yudon. I'm Georgie. He was taking the mick out of me last night, the way I speak, by the way. It was so many comments. We actually commented on last week about having a guest judge. Tick that box.
I'm just pleased I got out of bed this morning.
So the first pattern challenge was I'm not going to say this right. Jagori jacket. Jagori. Sorry, I've written to my writing. My sister had me in hospital till late last night.
Oh.
And I was watching it late and writing my note. I do apologise, because that isn't Jagori. It was the Jagori jacket top collar, Jagori jacket with a top collar. It was a wrap, and the ties had to be put in a particular way, which was really important. They needed to use 2 fabrics that contrasted. And the thing that the judges and all of the judges really made a big thing about was it had to be pressed flat. So, Lizzie, what were your thoughts on the pattern challenge?
Well, first of all, I was thrilled that it was a Korean episode, because I just love. I've got my Bajaj quilted behind me. I just love anything like that. So I was kind of thrilled, because it really ticked my box. That little jacket is superb. The combinations of fabrics that everybody used it's mind blowing, because it's not what you would choose. And it's always very, very interesting to see what people pick up. And one of the things they said was it had to hold its shape. It had to be kind of structured. And when you looked at the historic pictures of them, they're kind of stiff looking, aren't they?
Yeah.
So I did worry a little bit about the fabric choices. But I suppose once they're on the mannequin, they're going to sit properly, aren't they? Because they're just hanging. They're not on a body. But I loved the little jacket, and I wanted to make it straight away. But of course, like I say, it's down to then the colour choices. And I thought it was really interesting, because if you thought about making one, you've got a plethora of designs there that the people had put together, contestants, and you could definitely pick out some favourites. Oh, I wouldn't have put those colours together. Oh, that's rather nice. So if you're not very confident in colour matching, I thought that was a good exercise. And I was quite pleased that Kit won that. Although he didn't seem pleased. It's like, how about a whoop? That would be good. But yeah, so I was quite pleased about that. But I thought Kaz did very well. Her collar was beautiful. I mean, you know how difficult it is to put a collar to the back. It's a bit like binding of a quilt, and then quilting stitching on the top in the ditch. In the what did
They
Patrick?
called it sink stitch, and I was going to actually ask the question to both you ladies, because you're both super duper quilter people, and I was just wondering, have you ever heard that sink stitch? I've never come across that.
I think what it is that the stitch. Sorry, Lizzie, but it's supposed to be sewn in the seam. Now, years ago, I had a conversation with some quilters from Durham, and traditionally hand quilting often was done a stitch in the ditch because it was seen to be easier. It isn't easy on the machine because the minute you wobble off it, it shows up. The idea is in quilting is that you would open the seams and then you would stitch along that seam, which obviously doesn't translate into dressmaking as easily, but there is a stitch in the ditch foot. And the stitch in the ditch foot, which I'm quite sure they probably had, but didn't realise, has a blade in the centre that you can actually put onto the seam. And very much the advice that you gave, I think it was last week or the week before, don't watch the needle. You're watching where the blade goes and the needle will do its job. And it also is, so when it's sinking, it's actually the stitches should sink into the seam.
Yeah.
The problem that you've got when you've turned the seam to one side or the other side, so had the press, if you're doing it, press your seams flat is your first tip, even in dressmaking. If you press the seam to the side, it immediately causes a little bit of a ridge. And so your machine's effectively, the needle's going to fall off the seam occasionally. And I think that's what happened.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
I think the sink isn't a word that we would use. It is a stitch in the ditch, but it's sinking into the seam.
Yeah, and it can be really effective, and it will look beautiful on the front. It's a bit like when you do your quilts; it can look beautiful, but on the back it can be a complete disaster because that's invisible. You can't see that. So my immediate thought was, where are your pins?
Yes.
Why haven't you pinned all that? Even if it's, you can overpin it because it's so crucial not to get that twisted and to get everything to lie. Press it first, get that seam to lie in a certain way so you don't get that ridge, but also pin it within an inch of its life. It might take you 5 minutes, but the end result is so worth it. And I'd be very inclined, if it was me, I would have been very inclined to get at least the back of the neck lying flat. And I would even start stitching from the back of the neck and come out rather than from starting here and then going all the way around, because at least then you're not pushing that fabric. Was it Dan that his fabric was completely ruckled?
Yeah.
I mean, in another life it would make a great frill, but I think it needed to be really well pinned and pressed and then stitched. I think that perhaps, but then I know they're under the cosh and they may not have ever done anything like that before. And I think sometimes it's experience that teaches you that that's the best way forward. I don't know.
I mean, that collar, for instance, I'm a big advocate of the base stitch is your friend.
Yeah.
Just because when you're using things like pittons, I always go on about this, you're putting a really hard shaft of a pin into a piece of fabric. Now the pin comes out that way, but it creates a very small but ever so slight bump. If you do a tailor's tack or a giant running stitch, which is just a really clumsy in and out stitch, doesn't have to be huge or big, I would base the back side of that collar in.
Yes.
And then, but I would always mark the front. You've got the shoulder point, which is your side seam. And as long as you've got those points pinned or just basted, when you start from one side and go along, that collar, in actual fact, will be at least about 1.5 meters in length. So you're talking about as soon as you get a little bit of drag coming off, say, the right-hand side when you start, by the time you end up at the left-hand side, you've brought all that wave, which is what happened to Dan's.
Yes.
The other tip is, like Lizzie said, you can start at the actual collar. And if you're good at working left and right on the sewing machine, you stitch from the collar, you come all the way down to the right side, you start in the collar, and come all the way down to the left side, so that you're minimizing that drag. I wouldn't personally ever use stitch in the ditch for that particular application. I'm old school. I would hand stitch it into the back just to get a beautiful finish. And also some people say, well, you'll see the stitches. Well, that's what you're supposed to see. If it's hand finished, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
People, you know, who spend a lot of money on clothes, they actually want to see the stitches because it is hand stitched. Someone's taken the time to see it. And when you practice that, the quicker you'll become.
Yeah, of course.
Can I just ask your opinion? Because this has been bugging me all night. All of them said this was the most difficult pattern challenge. Now,
no way.
I'm looking at it. Oh, I'm glad you agree. I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, I think what was difficult about this is because it was a Korean top, that's what everyone got confused with in their head. They were like, okay, this is a traditional Korean thing. It's super complicated. It's what have you. To me, the pattern was relatively quite a flat pattern, and it was a bodice, 2 sleeves. It was a wrap over. It had a little stand collar, and it had some ties. I think they've been given far more complicated patterns on the first round across the whole thing.
But Dan made a comment, which we've had previously, that the instructions weren't amazing. So has it been what we perceive to be a straightforward pattern, but the instructions, as you know, if instructions aren't written well, particularly because one tie had to be on the inside on the right, one tie was on the left, and do you know what I mean? Sometimes you can read a pattern and it might as well be written in Korean or Japanese or Chinese or any language that you don't understand because the pattern isn't written correctly. So Dan did make that comment to the presenter.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the way it was. I'm making not an excuse for them, but I'm trying to understand. Maybe it was the way it was written, and they're following those instructions wasn't as clear as it could have been.
But you know, at the beginning of it, the viewer sees the construction. They see that line drawing of how it should be put together, which I think is brilliant, actually. And if the contestants saw that drawing, they would see immediately where things went, because Kaz put her little tie on the outside. I was heartbroken for her, because she'd done such a beautiful job with everything. And yet on that little animated drawing, it shows you quite clearly, do this, do that, place that inside, this, that and the other. And that is, for me, that's all I would need to construct that. I wouldn't need anything else.
So
I need the points of where to put stuff, but like the ties. But really, that is a great aid, and it's a pity perhaps they don't see that.
Yeah, that goes back to the instructions, really, doesn't it? If they had that up in the workroom, that they could go back and refer to it, because this isn't the first time somebody's got something the wrong way around.
Yes, the wrap dress.
I mean, was it the wrong way around? I actually bought a wrap dress just recently, and believe it or not, it was the way Dan had done it.
The other way round. Yeah.
Well, in actual fact, when Esme hands out the patterns, there is an illustration of the garment they're supposed to make on the front of the pattern.
So it should be clear from that line drawing then.
Yeah, from that line drawing. The line drawing is what it is. It's just I was struggling with the fact that because it was essentially, it was a top. It wasn't a full dress, so it wasn't like they've got lots of weight to sort of do it. It was quite small and compact. So it was just, the edit was, again, we're going to the edit, but I mean, they can't force people to say what they said, but they found that the hardest challenge. And
don't understand that.
To myself, that in relative terms, the amount of pattern pieces that you have, it's a very small amount of pattern pieces that you actually do have.
Yeah.
And you've got that illustration in the front, which people where the tie was coming out, I mean, Kaz did say, oh, once she had sewn it in, which is, look, it's happened to me. And when you sew something in, you actually suddenly think, oh, actually, you see it, and she realised a mistake straight away. She didn't change it, but she went, oh, I've sewn it in the wrong way, because when you hold it up, you can see one's coming out and it doesn't look like the picture. So if they hadn't got the physical example in, how would she have known that that tie wasn't necessarily supposed to be there if there was no pictorial reference? So it's not, I don't think it's just a Word document that's given in terms of instructions.
Yeah.
I just was interested because obviously so many of them said that they found this the most difficult pattern challenge so far. And I just couldn't necessarily understand.
Yeah.
Because I felt
that was challenging.
Yeah.
Perhaps because you say about the fact that it is Korean and it's like the pressure on to get the traditional side of that absolutely perfect. But one thing I want to say is, why can't they see the one that's been made? Because years ago, when I did made dresses for all sorts, you know, Liberty, Harvey Nicks, all of that, I would be sent the dress, the finished dress, and I'd be sent the parts, the jigsaw puzzle, as I always called it. And I had to recreate that dress from just looking at the original one that was made, the toile, I suppose. And for me, that was a godsend, because you could see how the seams went and you could see the order of it. It came second knowledge to see the order of how it's constructed. And these were very, very complicated dresses. But if they were allowed to see the original on the mannequin, and just every now and again quickly go up and think, oh yeah, okay, that goes there, that goes there. That's an aide memoir. That would be very useful for them, because they're already under a huge amount of stress.
The other thing that's just come into my head, thank you, Miss. The other thing that's just come into my head, the final challenge, they already had to. Now, essentially, even the designer Yudon Choi actually said the pattern challenge was essentially a much longer version of the first challenge. So they were able to research that well in advance of coming onto the show. So they would have had a real big basic concept as to what they were actually going to produce.
Yeah.
So
well, I think all three parts of the show they were all incredibly similar to each other.
Yes.
So their minds I would have thought would have been in the groove. You know, straps. Every single one had straps. You know, every single one had the ties to, you know, the actual knotting of and all of that, and which I found really interesting, because I think that I'm going to say this. I think that would make it easier.
Yeah,
because they're in that groove.
One thing that I would say to anybody who's wanting to recreate that pattern, any of them, and they're talking about the interfacing, which is my big bugbear. When you get your collar piece, which had to be interfaced, do that first. Interface it and then put it out, interface it and leave it, because you must leave it for 20 minutes. Now, I noticed on the original, the sample that Esme and Patrick used, the collar wasn't sitting right, and I think there was an interfacing issue that had been left correctly. So leave your interfacing, because you're going to glue that on for 20 to 30 minutes. Do something else, so make sure you do that. But yes, that sample wasn't as perfect when because that's the first thing I looked. I thought, oh, there's a rip in the collar.
It didn't quite lay perfectly, did it? No. But Kaz's did.
Kaz's was beautifully made. And Kaz, you're talking about colour, you know, we all live in our own sort of palette of colours. I was really scrutinising it because his first challenge, the tie blouse, I thought if it wasn't the same fabric, it was so similar in colours and design to this particular challenge. So he obviously focuses on that particular colour range. It was interesting.
Comfort zone, yeah.
So Kaz won that one, with Novello coming last. Now Novello came last and it was a ties. Dan was ties again, and then Yasmin I thought was a really close second to Kit.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on that, Lizzie?
No, I totally agree, and I know it's a shame that some of them didn't finish their bits and pieces off. But when you consider some of the key points that Patrick made about the collar has to lie flat, the ties have to be square.
Yes,
I know the finishing off is a different thing, but surely, you know, if you've done those things and made them so perfect, then I don't think you should be marked down the fact you haven't done your hems.
Yes.
you know, that's just then part of the finishing of the garment. So if you've ticked all the boxes that they've said, and there was like, there had to be like, well, ideally 2 colours. Well, I think all of did 3. You think, okay, you've gone off on a tangent. Okay. But then the fella, what's his name again? Sorry, Udon. He liked the fact that there was a 3rd colour. So it's very personal. We've always said that, haven't we? Like with Esme, she doesn't like certain colours together and certain things, and will mark down for that. And I think, well, I don't think you should. You should look at the construction. Those important points that they said about the fact that ideally 2 colours, the fact the ties should be square, the collar should be laying flat. Oh, and the ties should be in the correct position.
That's right, yes.
And I think that if those are your 3 main things, then I think that's what you should be marked on. But
I think I agree with you. I think you should get an extra point if they're looking for those 3 elements to be present. If you actually finish it in that allotted time, you're then elevated up to an extra thing. Because if you've actually genuinely finished it, then you know you have finished.
That's right. Yeah.
But I think in general, I think they are looking for it to be completely and utterly finished. However, I agree with your point. Like for instance, like Dan, that collar, it really. I feel for all of them, because literally in that time pressure, trying to get something that's to lie flat and to be perfect, and it's a big old thing, and they're following the instructions and they're told how they should sew it. So I get that, but just making sure that it's finished and then the construction isn't really there, then it's a bit of a balance, I think.
Yeah. And they're only given that one was only 3¼ hours, remember? So
it's not long.
Huge amount of time, you know, from choosing your fabric, cutting out your pieces, and then trying to finish it. Anyway, shall we move on to the transformation challenge?
Shall we?
Yes.
Let's do it.
This one filled my heart with joy because it's the first time that I can actually ever recall that they had identical.
Yes.
Ticked our box.
Yeah, I wrote it down, yes.
It was a big, whoa, they've been listening to the Sunbeam Natter over the previous years. So they were all given 1 tunic, I think it was 2 trousers, and the belts were bundled together, so there was no arguing. Now,
can I just say something? Where did the zips come in? Because they had 3 different coloured zips.
Yeah, didn't see a zip. I didn't see it. They didn't focus.
Did you not? They were laying on.
Yeah, I saw them, but I didn't focus on them in the actual the use of them. Did they?
I think it's because none of them actually used them. So then, because none of them used them, they couldn't actually critique.
Right.
Like why they hadn't used the zip. So I think they just momentarily.
But they didn't mention them even, did they?
No, it's very hard, I suppose, when you filmed a segment, when someone's telling you, say, what they're supposed to do, you can't bring Esme and Patrick back to then
redo it.
So I think the zips just got put by the ways. I mean, I agree with Kim in terms of everybody was given the set. This was a real even playing field.
Yeah.
However, when it comes to these transformation challenges, this type of one, I know it's for television, but my son did jiu-jitsu, and I know how much it cost me for that 2-piece and 1 belt. And I know that there's some families out there that could not, if their kid is lucky enough to be allowed to go to jiu-jitsu, because it's expensive, the outfit, and they were given a whole outfit and they were just cutting it up. I just cannot. And also next week is reuse, sustain, or whatever it's called. It just really I'm not a fan when they purposely use really there's nothing wrong with it. If they had said these are seconds from a factory, so they can't go on public sale, or they were water damaged or something, that's a slightly different story. But when you're buying, especially that, it goes back to when they used the cricket and everyone was cutting that up. I just thought some little cricket group that anyway, I'll stop.
Yes, because we've talked about that with the cycling tops as well. But let's go back to what we wanted, which was a level playing field. Now, the brief, and I'm going to mention the word brief because that's really important when we consider last week with the Versace brief, that they were to use all of the belts. And as a result of that, Novello and Jess, who chose to just use 1/2 colours, came in the bottom of the pack. But Lizzie, what was your thoughts about the actual transformation and also having to sew the thickness of and not using a walking foot?
Well, of course, Esme was talking about weaving because immediately I thought, oh, we could weave them, and I thought, well, you couldn't stitch them because the density of the. I mean, I don't know what a jiu-jitsu cord thingy feels like, but it looks quite heavy, and I think sewing two together you'd perhaps struggle. But I did a little whoop on my sofa when I saw the fact that everybody was going to get the same and that you weren't going to get this awfully embarrassing rush to the table to grab whatever. And I always felt sorry for the person last who just had to have what was left. I hated that. I hate that because there's no personal choice, is there, at all? But this time, yes, there was personal choice. And I was... Sorry, Alistair, but I was thrilled that they all had these outfits. I didn't even consider the cost, and for that I apologise because you're quite right. But I thought, what a wonderful amount of fabric they had. The belts with the colours, the vibrancy of that. And I think one or two of them really did well. See, now this is where I need my notes, which are on the phone that we're using here.
I'll help you out.
Well, there was one that did the. Let me have a quick look. I did write something down. Oh, all are with the side cuts.
Yes.
Now they were a bit critical about the fact there was only one stitch between each piece of webbing, and I thought that's unfair because if you were actually making it for somebody, you wouldn't use one stitch. So I thought, no, you can't judge her on that because the effect was.
It was time.
Yeah. I loved Dan with the K-pop. I loved that. And Patrick seemed so surprised that the webbing had been cut up and made into letters. I thought, no, that's just applique or whatever, you know, that's just normal. Jess with the white and black. I'm not going to say any more. Stuart had the cut and woven. Now that could have been really sensational if he slashed his fabrics, perhaps a little bit more evenly. But I really like the concept of that. And what was the other one? Oh, Gaynor had too many. Gaynor had too many rude bits because of her straps.
Bless her.
She was trying so hard to be lovely and modern and with it and everything. And Kit, I thought his looked like a kimono, and it was fabulous, don't get me wrong, but I thought the one that I loved the best, I think I'm right in saying, was Kaz. The fact that it was woven and she'd used all that colour back and front, and I actually preferred that to Kit's, but I loved the shape of Kit's, but it was actually quite a simple construction. It was just a rectangle, wasn't it? Brought in with the ties, but Kaz had done a little bit more work by weaving the belts, and and you know, I'm a lot softer than I used to be about this because in the past I was very critical about it all, and because it is for entertainment and television, we've always said that. But this time around, because I'm so interested in Korea, John thinks it's because I've got a car. I said, oh, I hadn't really thought about that, but that sort of...
There's a link.
Very small link. But I don't know what it is, but I felt very in tune with it all, and which kind of, I really enjoyed it. I don't always enjoy the sewing bee, I'll be honest. There's parts of it I think, oh dear, you know, why did they do that? Why did they choose this? Blah, blah, blah. But this time it was all ticking my boxes all the way. So everything they did, well, apart from on the transformation, obviously there were some that, you know, Novella's little skirt, and it just... it didn't work for me at all. And the other one with just the black and white, was that Jasmine.
Yes. But I tell you what was lovely was Yasmin's, who did the V shape. She zigzagged
Yes.
strips together.
Yes, I saw that.
That was very impactful.
Yes.
When you saw it, I thought they all did really well. Dan's was my personal favourite because of the way he'd done the trousers and then the applique on the top.
Yes.
Alistair, what about you?
I agree with like Lizzie. Give Gaynor a break, I've written here.
Yeah.
Because you've been saying to her, you know, I'd like to have seen more, you know, the Diane von Vostenberg, you know, the keyhole,
Yes.
you know, opening on the side. We need more flesh. We need more flesh. Well, she's giving you more flesh. Now you're telling her to cover up. It's like, you know, give the woman a break. But I loved Dan's. I actually felt I wrote down here and I put a big star. In fact, you can see that I'm not lying. I put a big star.
Oh, yeah,
to
big
Dan,
star.
and that was before the results came through. And I thought wholeheartedly, I did that, and I also starred Kaz's. I thought Kaz's, if not, but I thought Dan's, because of what was actually going on.
Yeah.
I thought, and also how much work he had, you know, I mean, I'm not dissing anybody else's work there, but I'm just saying there was so much going on, and it was a full, you know, it was a full, it wasn't just a sculptural one piece that you could say is a top stroke dress.
Yeah.
He had done, you know, he had done the two, and he had really thought about it, and he had done the little applique, and I actually thought he was going to win that challenge. I genuinely did.
He was fourth.
I know, which surprised me. Like Yasmin came third, Kaz, yep, she came second, which I was surprised at again, because I actually thought that layering up, and they're quite right. That could have gone into that could have been a film costume for, say, for instance, the Kill Bill series. You know, that type of thing. It was bang on. It was perfect. It was beautifully executed. She's a very, very good sewer.
Yeah.
In 90 minutes.
In 90 minutes.
90 minutes.
I just put that in just in case anybody thought I was being a bit harsh last week. But, you know, my viewpoint might change next week. It depends, you know, it depends on the edit. But Novello, yes, definitely. There was no inspiration there. She was very literal. And I think she had maybe just looked at it. I think the main thing that everyone has to look at, forget what you're given. Like when it was upholstery week and you're given a cushion and you're given, you know, an old bag and stuff like that. Forget what the items are. Look at that it's just fabric. If you unpicked it all and laid it all out, you could create a big quilt out of it. It is just fabric. Just think about it as fabric. Stop looking at it going, oh, they've given me a jacket and trousers. You know, you've got to think about it. Like when they gave the you know, the full skirts, there is so much fabric in that. Mitch was saying as well on when we had him on, it was literally, you've got so much fabric in there. Just think about it as fabric.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe it's the print in it or something, or the colors are speaking to you in a certain way to do something else. But I was really surprised. I was really surprised that Kit won over Kaz this time. I actually genuinely, I thought that the look of Kaz's and also the execution, like the finish on it, I thought was you couldn't knock it.
No, I agree.
And it was more than just a transformation for Kaz. It was it was really well put together. So
it was.
Kaz, you were a little bit robbed there.
I think so as well.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, we'll move on to the last challenge, which was the made to measure challenge. Now, the interesting thing was that they'd been allowed to do the research, and we did have a comment from Janet, who I'm actually going to get on if I can. She's watching, I'm sure, who was on series 5. Hi, Janet. So Janet actually, in her comment on last week's YouTube, did say that they do get time to do the research beforehand, which obviously came out with this particular one, because we questioned on, was it last week's, not the Versace, who was it? It was Vivienne Westwood. If you hadn't heard of Vivienne Westwood, you know, how did you know the safety pins and etc.
Yes.
What was, you know, apparent to her. But they had opportunity to do some research. They needed to do a garment, a military garment, which is what the Korean chuluk is. It's predominantly in men's wear, but they said it's moved over to women's wear. Basically, as you've said earlier, the upper body was a longer version of our first pattern challenge, with a lot of fabric in the skirt, which is how it was described as by the designer. Pleats. The skirt's attached, so you make the jacket, then the skirt's attached, and then lots of pleats. I will go straight to you because there was a variety. They were similar but very, very different. I thought this particular final challenge was excellent, in my opinion. Lizzie, I know you're a favourite of this particular episode. What was your thoughts on that last made to measure challenge?
Oh, I thought it's brilliant. I thought it's brilliant. I mean, first of all, they'd had the dummy run with the pattern challenge. They don't had that dummy run. So and I'm surprised that we didn't know that when they were doing the pattern challenge that was coming up later. Of course, they couldn't say, but I thought that was really interesting. They'd had a kind of trial run at it in a way, but they were all so different, and I loved them all for different reasons. And it's one of those things I thought to myself, I want to make this. I want to make a similar thing. I don't know what. I would certainly use a pattern rather than self-draft because there's quite a lot going on with the pleats and the ties and all of that. So I don't think I've got that much confidence in self-drafting. But so yeah, I think it was Novella, wasn't it, that she did her own pattern?
Yeah, Novella and
Kit.
It is as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I think that was possibly a mistake because it has to be so precise with the placement of the collar and the ties and everything. But there's a couple that really stood out for me. Yasmin, the red with the removable sleeves for art. I was going to nearly say archery. No, artery. It's not artery.
No, archery.
Nothing to do with blood, we hope. But it's archery.
Not archery. Arrows.
Exactly. Well, you know. Oh dear, Ernest. Anyway, but she had the concept of being able to take the sleeves off, and that was quite unique. I thought you wouldn't just come up with that idea. That was brilliant. She thought that through. She's actually very good, I think. Yes.
Yeah.
And the other one, which I totally loved, was Orla with the little suit, and I mean it was perfect. If you know, when you look back to Dan's K-pop. And Korea is all about K-pop and the youngsters, and it's fantastic, that scene, isn't it?
Yeah.
So full of life and vibrancy, you know, kind of, 100 years ago for me. But Orla, I think she epitomised the youth of Korea with that little outfit there. And she did so well to create. There were shorts, weren't they? I thought at first it was a skirt, but I think there were shorts, and they're all pleated, weren't they? And the little crop top and. Absolutely splendid. So I thought but there's so many because Jess did the grey and pink checked.
Yes,
and
that
they said I've forgotten the fella's name again.
Udon,
thank you. I was reminded because pastries, there's some pasta called Udon, so I've got to get that in my head. But anyway, she did this grey pink checked fabric dress, and he said it was a little playing on the safe side of it, but the silhouette of that dress was beautiful. It was beautiful, and her pleating, I mean, okay, they could have done with a bit more of a pressing and all of that sort of thing, but her pleating was really good, and she'd chosen the perfect fabric for it to match her pleats up. When you looked at Novella trying to get those pleats in that curtain fabric, I thought, wow, you are brave. But yeah, so the Jess with the grey pink check fabric dress, I thought that was absolutely beautiful. I thought they all were. And Kaz with the lime green.
Yes.
Oh, a gorgeous combination with that fabulous, almost like Versace type fabric, wasn't it, on the dress? And then this lime green lace. I thought it was all fabulous. Yeah, I did.
It was a shame with Jess because she'd overlocked on the back, and
I know.
And I wish they hadn't highlighted that.
No,
because it was, you couldn't have seen. I mean, it would be a blind man and a horse, as I would say. I mean, it was gutting for her, but yeah, when they highlighted that, I could have cried. I
Yeah.
agree with that. What did you think about Dan's quilted?
Well, I could see structurally
Yes,
where he was going. I could see, because, and also if you go back to the history, it was all about, they were like an armor, weren't they?
yes,
You know, so I could see that if it had been black quilted leather, he was on the right track for that type of garment, the cholik. But to pick the green, I thought, oh my gosh, surely he's not going to pleat that, because you could have constructed it fairly simply, maybe a little bit of a gather to get that. He wanted that shape, didn't he? I could see what he was doing. The colours were a little bit interesting, but but putting that all aside, I think he really set him up for a challenge there. But as I say, I could see where his thought process was going. But I thought they'd practice this at home.
I think if he'd chosen a thinner quilted fabric,
Yes,
it would have been easier for him. It was far too thick.
yeah.
Alistair, what were your thoughts on this last challenge?
Well,
You
just
had on Stuart's trench coat.
Well, yeah, I've got a really big comment, Naughty Patrick, about that, in setting rules. But just going back to what Lizzie said about Dan's, I could kind of see where Dan was going. So it was very sort of like Yoji Yamamoto, Izzy Miyake, and also with a bit of Comme des Garçons and Costume National thrown in. I could see the voluminous structural sort of like, let's do a puffer coat, but let's make it ginormous. I could kind of see where he was sort of coming from that, and it was so different. Unfortunately, it just didn't quite pay off. So I wasn't really a fan, and also the color choice. I really wasn't a fan. If he had chosen, say, for instance, like black and navy, or slight grey and a lighter grey, it wouldn't have been as offensive in terms of visually. And I think it would have looked a little bit smarter, but that's just a personal colour choice. So I actually thought, so Kim's preempted me. So, well, the first thing that I really want to say is that I thought this week's was such a disadvantage to everybody, because I don't know where you would even begin to go out and find a chalok pattern. In terms of, I will just I know what I'll do. I will go onto a Korean website and I'll have it flown over just in time for the show. I thought it had to be inspired, but there is no real there is no real sort of like pattern. There are historical references in our own culture. So for instance, if you go back to the sort of like Jane Austen days, you can see that they've got that bib front with all the pleating coming down at the front. So we do have references to it ourselves in our own garment history. But I thought it was really unfair that they had been told to use that as an inspiration, and it was a kind of a sink or swim sort of like swim sort of situation. So hence why a couple of them decided to self-draft their own, because that obviously had to force them to do it. So it's not a design challenge. It's all about the making up and the sewing and execution at the end of it. So I thought that was really sort of unfair. However, Stuart's, right? I thought concept, because they were all doing concepts. So the concept, it was your own take on the chalok. I thought his concept for a Western eye was bang on brief. I thought he'd done an absolute sterling job. Now, I don't think Patrick really knew how to critique it, because he was looking at it from the terminology he was using in the critiques he was doing. He was trying to do a Savile Row critique on it. Now, bear in mind, I used to have my studios next door to him on Savile Row, so I know the terminology. And I thought the chalok is longer in the body.
Yeah.
That is what it's supposed to be. He critiqued that trench coat by saying it was longer in the body. It's supposed, well, I'm going to give Stuart the benefit of the doubt and say that it was supposed to be like that. And I wholeheartedly do think it was to be like that.
Yeah, I agree.
I actually thought that those comments weren't helpful. And if you're going to set points in which you're going to critique the contestants on. It should be fairly done, not critiquing it just because you're critiquing it on the trench coat side of it.
Yeah.
He paid homage, but he did a Western twist on it. So I thought that was very clever. Denim, absolutely loved. Can I just say, you haven't even mentioned, and I'm going to champion, and Glamorgan Gaynor, if you're watching, Novella, because she said she's Welsh as well. I thought Gaynor's was absolutely beautiful. And even the designer, Udon Choi, actually said, you could sell that in Korea.
I would wear that
tomorrow. I thought,
yeah, me too.
I would have it tomorrow.
Yeah, I thought and some of the color choices that Gaynor has chosen in previous challenge, I've not been a fan of, but that two-tonal thing with the little eucalyptus on the thing, I just thought it was so beautiful and clean and just yeah. I think, in fact, actually, yeah, you would be able to sell that here in the UK. I thought it was absolutely beautifully made.
Udon said selling in Korea, underlined Gaynor selling in Korea.
Yeah.
Sell, yeah. It was
beautiful.
I thought it was absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Novello's one, as soon as I saw the fabric choice, not my favorite choice, but again, if we go with the fabric type, the composite, using an old curtain and a heavy damask fabric in something like this, it looked very regal, but save that for medieval week. It's not, that doesn't necessarily fall in. If she'd used a lightweight brocade, that would have been a more appropriate fabric to use for this particular one, because there's such volume of fabric in there.
Yeah.
Dan's, really shame about, just I really didn't, I kind of got where he was going but didn't really like it. Kit's had a lot of drama, but again, the collar, although visually from a distance the whole thing does look impactful, when you actually get up close to it, the extension of how the construction is. And I know he self-drafted it, but that takes a few years as a pattern cutter to understand when you've got a pattern, an actual physical paper pattern, and it might be sitting on the dummy, because you do offer your pattern pieces up to the dummy. If it's sitting in the right way, when you put it into a fabric takes on a completely different feeling way. It does its own thing. So you just got to be sort of like mindful of that. I thought Jess's was very whimsical. Ola's, it had a really, really nice modern. I thought it was fun. It hit the brief. Yasmin's, yeah, I thought it was very, very nice, but it looked like it was just a direct replica of the actual article. It was beautifully sewn, but it didn't look necessary. Have I got the right one? It was Yasmin did the black and the
no, she
black
she did the, it was pink, the military, it was the archery one, red and black with the detachable sleeves. I called it the archery dress.
Who am I thinking of that did the there was another red and a black.
Red and black was Kit. He was the jumpsuit. Kaz was the camo with the lime green. Novello was the gold brocade. Ola was the fab yellow. Stuart was the raincoat in denim. Yasmin was it was a red and a black, but with the detachable sleeves. Dan was the red and green, but as soon as the presenter made the Christmas reference, that was in everybody's head.
Yeah.
Jess had the gorgeous checkered dress. Gaynor was the beautiful linen. So it probably is Yasmin that you're thinking of. But it had the detached. I thought it was really clever on the sleeve, because as an effect, as a wearable, I would see that as something that I would go out and buy, because I love that detail on the sleeve. It made it so different to everybody else's.
Yeah.
It's not practical. You're not going to be removing all those buttons, but as a design feature, I thought that was really good. And then when she gave the explanation as to why she'd done that, because of the archery connection and, you know, the history, it just really lent into the fact that she had actually researched things properly.
Yeah, done the research. Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I thought it was beautifully made, but I think visually, because it was supposed to be like a twist, if you like,
Right.
I didn't see where the twist was. It was beautifully executed, beautifully made, but I didn't necessarily see. I thought from when they started showing you know, all the pictures of, you know, the historical reference when we had the lady from the Victoria and Albert Museum telling us all about, you know, where it had come from and stuff. I just thought it was quite literal.
Right. Right.
Whereas I thought it was quite traditional compared to everybody else's, because obviously we're judging this by the overview of everybody's sort of like efforts. And I thought Kaz's, yes, I was actually, I was very, very surprised that because when I saw the fabric choices and the lime green, I thought you're either going to put that in the wrong place and it's going to overpower the whole outfit, but she had just enough of it.
Yeah.
Just to lift and be quirky. I think if she had any more of it elsewhere, I think that could have easily have wrecked that outfit. But it was nice that it was just the sleeve and it was just on the under.
Yeah.
And so, I like that she'd used a clip.
Yes,
she'd used a clip, which is a bit of a modern twist, which I quite liked. Yeah.
So the garment of the week, no surprise, was Kaz, which was the camo with the green, and I think we'll probably all agree that that was. Well, do we all agree that that was the garment of the week? Liz, would you have had something else?
I think it deserved it because it was very brave to put that lace with that fabric. I thought, yeah, and like Alistair said, it could have been a disaster if it had been too much or in different places on the dress. So, I do agree. But I think there were so many that actually, if they'd had their own category, they would have been absolutely the top of it. Like you say, with Gaynor with that linen dress I could wear that now.
Yeah.
Just pass it to me, I'll pop it on. Orla with that lovely K-pop feel about her outfit. She was top of the class. And then Jess with that beautiful, like Alistair, you said whimsical, and I think that kind of sums it up. So kind of there's at least and Dan, and not Dan, Stuart with his denim. Do you know what I mean? They were all very elevated designs, I thought. I know you have to pick one, but I suppose that was the cleverness of putting the lace with the fabric and how it looked generally. Okay, top of the class. I quite, but they're all super. I thought, definitely.
Would you have had another standout favourite, Alistair?
Well, obviously, give a big shout out to Gaynor. I thought the make of it was, Gaynor didn't get bogged down in trying to reinvent this sort of like wheel.
Yeah.
Whereas I know that this is what the vast majority of people like to. But then, I haven't seen Stuart's close up, but I thought the concept of what he sort of came up with in terms of using the Western trench coat, mixing in the traditional pattern and using that as inspiration. I thought all the elements were there, and there was a staggering amount of work in that one garment.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, from what I saw, apart from Patrick's, you know, critique about it being too long in the body and this, that, and the other, I actually, when I heard, when it came on and he said what he was going to do, I thought, oh, actually, that's quite, so as you said, Lizzie, it's very, very difficult because you could put them all, you could compartmentalize them all for being, you know, they got the youth market and they got the traditional market and they got, you know, this, what have you. So it was, I think I would have probably struggled this week to have picked a winner. I thought that Kaz's was, I thought if we stripped it down, I'll do it this way. If everyone had been given calico and I was looking at all cream versions of all of their outfits, like the transformation challenge, I would have possibly have chosen Stuart's.
Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah. Okay, so the person that went home was Novello. I think Dan's trousers in the transformation challenge possibly saved him. Because I think he was quite close because of this last made to measure. And it was a shame to see Novello go because she is a beautiful sewer. But somebody has to go home, which is just such a shame. So we'll probably all agree that, or do we all agree that Novello was the right choice this week? Very difficult choice, I think, because I think they were all quite close.
I think yes, I think I agree. She's a great stitcher. I think some of her choices of fabrics have been a bit wild. And I think maybe as the weeks went on, she would perhaps struggle more, perhaps. And I loved her hats. I loved her hats. And I loved her personality. And she was always rushing, wasn't she? Always up against the deadline and all of that. So and in actual fact, that's what makes the program, the personalities. So you don't want them to be all bland and brilliant. You want them to have those quirky personalities. Like, you know, Kit stands out as a quirky personality. He said a few things that I thought, oh, okay. So it was interesting that Novella went. But like you say, somebody has to go. But I think she was the best choice for that. Yes.
Yeah. So next week is reduce, reuse, recycle with a zero waste jacket. They're having tents for festival wear, and then it's a make, do, and mend on the catwalk. So let's see what happens next week. And we've got Wendy Gardner joining us to.
Oh, that's lovely.
One. Yeah.
Oh, but Kim, you need to remember I put in a holiday form, so I'm not here next week.
I think you are. But last week, Alistair offered 10 different patterns. It was how to make a wrap dress from your t-shirt. So it was a bit of drafting. There was 10 winners. I've messaged everybody on YouTube. So they are Derek Calder and Jean Tillotson, who basically last week wanted guest judges. So tick that box. Christine Creer. These are the names on YouTube. So they may be not their real names. Laura Jones, Angela Tarrant, Janet Poole, Yvonne Memory, so it may not be Yvonne Memory.
It is Yvonne Memory. She's one of my ladies.
Oh, excellent. Well, Yvonne Memory, Christine Robinson, Julia Llewellyn, and Joan Taylor. I have messaged everybody on the YouTube channel to say, please email at sales@six-penny.com to give me a delivery address. Remember this week that Lizzie has been so kind to offer 2 books on her website. Two of her books. Leave a comment on the YouTube. And Alistair, I think you've got a little giveaway as well. So actually, I think we're going to have 6 winners this week.
We're going to have 6 winners. God, we're up in the price. So what we have for you this week is, now this is Moon Thread. Now you're getting 5 spools. Sorry, the light's catching it. There we go. So you're getting 5 spools. They will be chosen at random, but they're all 1,000 meters. Now this is high spun polyester thread by Coats Cotton. Now this is the brand called Moon. Now we've got 5 of these packs to give away. So essentially, if you went out to a store, we're being economical here, but if you went out there, they're worth about £15 if you were to go out and buy all 5. Okay.
Thank you.
So we've got 5 of those. So we've got 6 prizes. Thank you, Lizzie, so much. That's really kind of you.
So all you got to do is leave a comment on the YouTube channel. Also remember that Alistair still has a 15% discount, and the code is B, which is BEE 2025, and you'll get 15%. And it's a secret, but it's on his sale items as well.
Yeah, and make sure you put it in, because there's some people who I know have potentially been watching, and you just haven't bothered to put the actual code in at the end. You'll get 15% off.
Yeah,
that's your morning coffee in a famous thing with a lady with long green hair, or even apparently, as I popped into Co-op, apparently there's one beginning with C, ending in A, that apparently is Britain's favourite. I mean, I thought it was the one beginning in N, ending in O.
That's too cryptic for me.
Okay, the first one was Starbucks, the second one was Costa, and the third one was Cafe Nero. Okay,
right.
Just to put it out there. Now I've mentioned 3. There are other coffee operatives available. Please check your local borough.
Okay, well, Lizzie, can I thank you, because I know you've got an appointment this morning to rush off to. So thank you so much for spending time with us, talking about the Sewn Bee again. So
thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely.
Oh, always.
It's not the Sewn Bee Natter without Lizzie, let me tell you.
Exactly. And Lizzie always has a very different opinion, and it's great when we have a difference of opinion, because it just shows everybody out there that everyone does, and everybody's opinion is valid. Just because I have a different opinion to somebody else doesn't mean I'm right and you're wrong.
No. That's just how it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm going to say goodbye, and I'll see you everybody next week.
Bye.
Bye bye.